Hi. Okay, so I said I would do a video about the lunar eclipse that we just had, so here it is. On Friday night, we had a full moon. It was a full moon in Taurus, and it was also a lunar eclipse. We haven't had a lunar eclipse like this one since the pyramids at Machu Picchu were built, and that was a time of a lot of spiritual shifting and consciousness changing, just like this time, so it is no coincidence. But what does an eclipse do, and what does eclipse season do? So every year we have eclipse season, and it is when there are a series of eclipses that take place kind of back to back to back, and it is definitely a time of a lot of energetic shifting and moving. Lots of ideas come in, a lot of ideas are taken out, but it's definitely a time of a lot of change. So this one is no different. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit more intense than what it brought in, and that we will be working with this now for probably the next 100 years or 200 years. It's going to be kind of the new theme for all of us, okay? And that is the theme of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and really healing those two energies. I know that we've been working with that for a while, but it's really going to be amped up, and it's going to be all around us on a very regular basis. So before I start really talking at length about this, I would like to read to you guys something called the principle of gender, which is a spiritual principle. I work with the Hermetic laws. There's 7 of them. They are the spiritual, physical laws of the universe. So to me, they're really the only laws that you need to work with. And everything that I speak about is based off of these laws and principles. So when we speak about the divine masculine and the divine feminine, it really is good to understand the principle of gender. So forgive me while I read this, but the way it's written is so perfect that I don't want to change a thing. The principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and the feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the 2 elements or principles, or this great principle. Within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains the male principle. Okay. So keep that in mind when we talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine, because we all have aspects of both inside of us, okay? So there is going to be a lot of internal work with the balancing of the divine feminine and the divine masculine inside of us. That's going to look like finding what the Buddhists call the middle path. We're working on kind of this expanding and integration of our higher self and our physical self, right? That is really what the ascension is about. It's that movement with that into the trinity, the physical body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body, right? So when we do this work, it will look a lot like balancing these elements inside of us. But I'm not going to talk about that too much right now, because you'll find that as I speak about this principle and what we're going to see externally, the internal work will weave itself around into it, which is, by the way, the principle of correspondence. So that one I think everybody's familiar with. That's as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. Once again, a Hermetic principle. But we are going to talk right now about the divine feminine, what the divine feminine needs to heal, and what the divine masculine is going to be healing and needs to heal. I will also be speaking about the patriarchy, but before I move forward, I want people to understand that when I say the word patriarchy, I don't look at this as a condemnation of men. This has absolutely very little, believe it or not, to do with men. Let's think of the patriarchy as a system that was created, whether it was consciously or unconsciously, over time, that created duality, the false illusion of duality between the genders. And it is an outmoded system. We did all buy into it. We are part of the creation of the patriarchy. It wasn't something that was thrust upon us that we just all of a sudden one day, had to believe. This was a creation of our own making that took a very long time to create. And now it is no longer serving us, and we're going to be dismantling it, okay? But it is important that within the context of speaking about this, that no one feels judged. There is no judgment in this. We have created this system and we are all suffering under it in different ways, okay? So, when it comes to the divine feminine, we're going to see the continuation of the divine feminine, understanding what their divine power is and taking their divine power back, okay? Reasserting their divine power. With the divine masculine, we're going to see the theme of forgiveness play heavily into the work that they're going to be doing. So, what does all of this juiciness mean? Okay. When it comes to, I want to talk about what the patriarchy has kind of told us and that we have believed. And, once again, it is that interesting. We created it as well. So we're part of all of this. What we've told ourselves and told each other and then created this big monster. What we have done is we have taken traits that are inherent in both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and we've polarized them and told each other, told ourselves and each other that these traits can only exist in one or the other. And because of that, we are both suffering because that is not real. That is an illusion. Duality itself is an illusion, right? Even though we're looking at the principles of gender, which seem to be opposite. Let's think of this on a continuum. It's all made of the same stuff, and at a certain point it touches. So in its duality, it also is similar, right? So it's like the individuated consciousness and the collective consciousness. It's the same idea. What the divine masculine is going to be working with is the theme of, like I said, forgiveness. The divine masculine has been told, or was told, that they were not allowed to have the uniquely, which it is not unique to the feminine, the trait of vulnerability. They were told, the divine masculine, which started to lose its divinity when it believed this lie, the masculine started to believe that the idea of vulnerability was not something that they could hold, that it was unsafe, that it was dangerous to have the trait of vulnerability, right? Which is really interesting if we want to take a quick pause on this one, because the Tao Te Ching said, one of the things that the Tao said was, the hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail, right? The greatest warriors are the ones that get on their knees and surrender sometimes. So this was definitely not a real principle. But the divine masculine started to become the masculine, the imbalanced masculine, when they were told that they were not allowed to have any vulnerability. Now, with that vulnerability comes all of those other beautiful things, right? Tenderness and presence, and all of the things that we now associate with a more feminized perspective. Okay, and what the divine feminine was told that turned her into the feminine was that having power, having strength was something that was uniquely masculine. And when the divine feminine started to believe that, she lost her divinity as well, right? The interesting thing is that both are true for both. And they still displayed those characteristics, but we were shamed for having any elements of those. And what we're going to see happening is the divine masculine starting to untangle what it means to be vulnerable. Not vulnerable in the feminine understanding, but vulnerable, uniquely vulnerable for the divine masculine. What does that look like? How does that feel? And when they start sitting in that vulnerability, right, they're going to start feeling these really painful feelings of guilt, of shame, of self-hatred that will come from seeing what they feel that they have done to the divine feminine. And the interesting thing is that it's very rare that I meet a man that is not deeply sad by what the masculine, not the divine masculine, what the masculine has done to the feminine. There's so much sadness there. There's so much shame. There's so much regret. And so, once again, this was the patriarchy. This was not the divine masculine. The divine masculine is deeply sad that this happened to the divine feminine, right? And there will be so much forgiveness that needs to take place. The divine masculine needs to understand that it wasn't necessarily their fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. If anything, it was all of our faults that this paradigm was created. But there wasn't awareness, right? So that deep shame, that deep sadness, that deep sorrow of what they did and allowed to happen is going to start coming up. The interesting thing is that the divine masculine does have an innate need to protect the divine feminine. That definitely comes out. And so they will start feeling as if they didn't do their jobs. They didn't show up. They didn't protect, right? Even though that was what they were trying to do uniquely to them. And we're going to go and look at the divine feminine's part in all of this. The divine feminine was told that strength and being invulnerable was uniquely masculine, and that the divine feminine didn't possess those traits. What the divine feminine, which then became the feminine, we took the divinity out, possessed, and what we knew how to do was how to be vulnerable, was how to nurture, was how to feel, right? And so we gave away the idea that we had power, we had strength to the masculine, which no longer is divine. And the masculine gave, we took the idea that the masculine can be vulnerable, can be tender, can be scared, can be full of softness away from them. And the divide got wider and wider and wider. And then we started trying to tell each other how to be better versions of themselves by acting more like us. So the divine feminine enabled. We enabled the divine masculine. How? By, like the mother who doesn't allow her child to fall down and get up because she doesn't want them to get hurt. We enabled the divine masculine by telling him how to feel, what that it was going to feel like, what vulnerability, what nurturing, what these things, connection looks like, right? We wanted to fix, we wanted to go in because we were told that that's what we do. We nurture. So we went into nurture, 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 nurture at the expense of the divine masculine, who never learned truly what it was like to feel uniquely divine masculine in that vulnerability. What does that look like in that presence, in that energy? Because vulnerability is going to look very different in the divine masculine than vulnerability does in the divine feminine. Why? Because it is a trait that is not unique to either gender or, right, the spectrum in between. It's something that we all possess, right? And the same thing happened with the divine masculine. They were told the only thing they were good at was to go and protect and to save and to be strong. So much so that the divine feminine had no idea. Now the feminine, the divinity, was stripped away, had no idea what it felt like or looked like to be uniquely strong and powerful in the divine feminine expression of the energy. Once again, let's go back to how interesting it is that we still possessed those qualities. Of course, the masculine was vulnerable. Of course, the feminine was strong. But then we shamed each other for those qualities, right? So this is not one energy's fault. There is no fault. We worked, we bought into the lie, and we told each other the lies continuously. But because we somewhere in there knew that it wasn't the truth, we also told each other that we didn't want you to be like that. We want you to be like that, but we don't. So here we are, and there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of fear. And it is going to be unbelievably painful because we are going to have to take responsibility for our parts in this. The divine feminine, when you become divine, you have to understand that what is unique in us, the divine masculine possesses as well. And it will not look the same in the divine masculine as it does in us. And we are so used to telling the masculine that this is what nurturing looks like. This is what vulnerability looks like. This is what givingness looks like. Because we have only understood, we've understood that only our version of that is the correct version. We're going to have to let them find that for themselves. They're going to fall down. They're going to stumble. It is going to be in our nature to want to run and fix and tell them how to do it the right way. But let's really look at that. Is that love? Is that divinity? It isn't. You know, and I just had this happen to me. Somebody that I care about was going through something, and I sat there and I thought. I was like, but it should look like this. Healing should look like this. Vulnerability should look like this. Why? Because I know. Because this is my job. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do best, right? You know, the expression of the divine masculine at that point didn't make sense to me because I hadn't experienced that. This shutting down, this wanting, or not even shutting down, this needing to be alone, this deep introspection that comes with what is an expression right now, I think, of the divine masculine. That seemed to me, because we've all been told that the correct way to express vulnerability is to connect and to, communicate. So, of course, I was like, but this is how you do it. Now, here's the thing. I have no idea what the version of vulnerability looks like that the divine masculine holds? I don't know. I don't know if the divine masculine knows what it looks like. They are going to have to find it, and we're going to have to resist the urge to tell them what it looks like. And they're going to find it, and then they're going to show us and let us know, right? And the divine masculine, it's the same thing with strength. What does it look like? And when the divine feminine is finding her strength, the divine masculine is going to have to work really, really hard to not feel insecure and shame the divine feminine for her expression of strength. What does that look like? Will it be in alignment with what the divine masculine strength looks like? Will it be something else? The divine masculine is going to have to step out of their own way and allow the divine feminine to rise up and feel her strength and feel her power. And they will have to celebrate that space. How beautiful that is, right? For her to use her voice, for the divine feminine to find that voice. And so it is a celebration of this, of the unique differences of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, but at the same time, a celebration of the fact that we all share in the same thing, right? It just looks different. Once again, I do want to say it doesn't matter what the physical body is. It matters how you feel. So this work is internalized, right? And you are going to probably fall somewhere on the spectrum. And what we have seen is that we do have aspects of each on each side of the spectrum. Why? Because we're all part of the universe. We're all part of the same energy. We're all part of God. It is really at the end of the day, the same thing. So the takeaway, the divine feminine is going to stand in the seat of her power, sit in the seat of her power, and remove herself from anger and blame that she doesn't have the power or she didn't have the power. We have to remember we were part of this as well. We gave the power away at some point, and then it was taken. I mean, it's a back and forth. And the divine masculine is going to have to allow the divine feminine to rise up and forgive himself for what he will then feel like he's done to the divine feminine. And at the end of the day, the divine masculine didn't do what they thought they did. They need to forgive themselves. That was the patriarchy. That was the creation that we made. The divine masculine is going to hurt and feel deeply ashamed because at the end of the day, they want to nurture, love, and protect the divine feminine, and they didn't do their jobs. That's the way they're going to feel. I know it's going to be tempting for the divine feminine to lash out and say, that's right, you did this. You created this pain in us. How do we find compassion? Not only compassion for them, but compassion for ourselves. And the same thing for the divine masculine. How do you find compassion? Not only for us, but for yourself. Because the most toxic part of the patriarchy was not, it's men who ruled the world. No, the most toxic part of the patriarchy is the horrible illusion of duality that was created by this monster that we made. Sure, there are differences, right? There is polarity, but there's also unity. We're made of the same thing. We're beautiful complements to each other. We hold the same understanding and the same ideas, but we express them differently. And we're made to move and weave whatever amount of that expression of either gender we hold in ourselves. We're made to weave and move in and out of that energetic space with each other. It's a beautiful, beautiful dance. So moving forward, this is the work we're going to see. It's going to continue. It's going to be hard. There are going to be moments where we fall down. There are going to be moments where we blame. There are going to be moments where we're scared. and horribly, horribly ashamed. But this is the work that needs to be done. This system of duality is no longer effective for any of us. It is unbelievably toxic. So let's come together to shift the system, to create a new system. We built the old one together. Let's pull it down together. And with this new understanding, create something new. So I hope that helped. It was a lot of information. I have so much more to say about it, but that's kind of the beginning. And thank you for tuning in. If you need me, you always know where I am. And please do share this. I know everybody kind of heard about my social media journey, but it has been a real hit. And this is it's a frustrating time for this to happen because this is information that really needs to get out there. So I'm relying on you guys to spread the word and spread the information. And we'll send this video around, ask people to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will continue to give you information as I get it. So thank you so much, and I will speak to you guys soon.